Welcome to RickRackRuby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this Scrappy Patchwork Santa ornament. He's fun and easy, so let's get started. The Crazy-Quilt Santa starts with a foundation. I've cut this out of 50 weight Pellon, and I will describe the pattern for you at the end of the video. We're going to start with any piece that you like. It doesn't have to be dark or light or anything in particular, just something that you like. And we want to cut an irregular shaped figure with hopefully no right angles. That looks good. And I'm going to set this kind of a little bit off center here. Maybe that's a little bit too close. Okay, and then I have my machine threaded with white thread. I'm going to use the smallest seam allowance that I can manage. My needle is all the way to the right. And then I have a stack of scraps here, and I will just kind of choose some sort of contrasting fabrics. I'll start right here. And I think I might even be able to do it this way. No. I'm going to set this here, stitch along that first edge right there, and then fold it back. And I will choose one of the embroidery stitches on my machine and put a little embroidery stitch along the edge, and it'll be in white, so it'll be a nice contrast. I'm not doing any back stitching. And I have my handy iron here. I'm going to press that flat, and then I'll do a machine embroidery stitch along that edge. I did sort of a triple zigzag, and then I'm back to my regular stitch. The next edge I'll work on is this one right here. This is more pink than red, but I do like it. This one might work. I'm just going to check it to see if I use that one. It's not quite big enough. How about this one? This should work. All right. So I'll place this piece along this edge, stitch along here, fold it back, press it, and embroider. I'm going to fold this back, but first, I want you to know that you can trim out that previous piece. And I'm going to throw that away. Yay! Because eventually you do want to use up your scraps. There we go. Press and embroider. I tend to use the heavier embroidery stitches toward the bottom of the project. And this is obviously so big that I'm just going to trim it away right now, so I don't have to have it flopping around while I'm doing the embroidery. My Bernina has a stitch that's a blanket stitch, but it kind of like overlaps, so it's like a double blanket stitch, and I really like it. I use it a lot. Next, we'll do this edge. I think maybe it's time for this pink fabric. It's really cute. Maybe get the mitten in. Let's see. I think the mitten will show if I get it right like that. Okay. Get rid of all this extra fabric. And I think I'll do a feather stitch along here. Now for this edge, let's see. This one might work. Let's see. I think so. Yeah, I think so. Okay. So I will stitch from here to here. This is the size of my seam allowance. 3/16. 3/16 of an inch. Everything beyond my foundation I can cut off. And then I can see that this is the next angle that I'm going to stitch along. So I can feel pretty confident just cutting this off like this. Now I'll do some embroidery along this edge. This is a little leaf design. Now I need a, right here will be next. How about this one? That looks good. So I'll stitch along there with my 3/16 inch seam allowance. My next angle is right here, so I can cut this like this, about like this. And then this, of course. And I'm going to do a kind, maybe I'm going to repeat maybe this one, this triple zigzag right here. I felt like this fabric and this fabric were kind of similar, so I wanted to give a kind of a thicker embroidery to delineate between these two fabrics. Okay, now we need something for right here. I think I'm going to repeat this fabric. So I'll stitch from here all the way off the edge. This will be a long patch, but it's thin, so it doesn't create a lot of visual weight. I think I'll do another feather stitch along here. I'm going to add something lighter up here, this one. And I can create my own angle at this point. I don't have to follow the angle of the center patch, so I'm going to tip it down a little bit in this direction. And it's not quite enough fabric. Well, it might be. We'll see. Anyway, that's my plan, here to here. To be honest, the top patch will be mostly covered up by the beard. So it's not, don't use your very special, most beautiful fabric at the very top. All right, so now I will probably, what should I do? Maybe I'll do this little leaf design again. So there's my completed front. Now from the back, I'm going to stitch around very close to the edge of the foundation and cut it out right on the line. This is going to be perfect. I think I'll choose this fabric for the back because I kind of like to choose a fabric that's on the outside edge so it kind of blends. I don't know why, but I like the way that looks. I'm looking for more of a scrap of that. I guess I don't have any scraps that are big enough. I might, this is the hat, and I might make the hat also out of that fabric. Right sides together, a couple of pins, and then I'm going to stitch around the edge, leaving the top open with a 3/16 inch seam allowance. But you can see that I gave myself a wide margin on the backing fabric. I don't see any reason to have to cut that backing the same size as the front. It's too much trouble. I did backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and I left the top open for stuffing. Now I'll trim this even with the edge of the foundation fabric. Maybe I'll clip a little bit. These aren't really corners, but we want them to turn smoothly. I'm being very careful not to cut through my actual stitching line. My corners are nice and round. I'll use my iron one more time, but I'm done, so I'm going to set that aside. Now I'll stuff it. This opening is big enough to stuff. I can reach in that, but sometimes, I don't know, I just tuck that top in a little bit. And even though it's the same size, for some reason it seems easier to get the stuffing in. That's about enough. I'll add a little bit more. I want to have the neck nice and firm so that it supports the head well. Now I'll gather up the top by hand. I'm going to go around the circle. If I had red quilting thread, I would use it, but I only have white right now. I'm tucking the gathers in, drawing the thread tight. Creates a little, like a little belly button there on the top. I think I'll go around again. And that is nice and secure. I'll tie off my thread. I've already made some Santa faces, and I know that I've described this before in a previous video, and I think what I'm going to do is make a separate video just for the Santa face so that I can continue to refer to it every time we do a project like this. So I have hot glue on there. I'm just going to press that right onto the top, and that also helps hold that closed. I like a stuffed project where you don't have to stitch the opening closed along the side seam. That's just a little too fiddly. While I still have the white thread in my machine, let's make the beard. So for the beard, I'm going to use a 3x5 index card. Fold it in half. And then I have this little curly mohair. It's pretty fine. So it goes around the card quite a few times. Just cover up the card from end to end and then go back in the opposite direction. Okay, now I'm going to sew across the center. I sewed across the center and then back. So I'll tear out the card. This is easy. It's coming right out. And this beard will go right around the head. Perfect, just like that. And then we're going to fold it down and it will become a beard. So I will apply some hot glue about halfway between the features and the body. So right underneath those cheeks. I'll just go from cheek to cheek and then I'll press the center of this bundle right into that line of glue. There we go. And then I'll apply some more glue from here to the center back. And then from here to the center back. Now I'll just check. Yeah, that looks good. Now I'll apply some glue right on top of the stitches. I just went all the way around. And now I'll press the beard into that glue. That is just about the most ideal length and amount of yarn to make a really cute beard. I like that a lot. I'm just spot gluing a few other spots. Now for the mustache. If you've watched any of my videos, you know what's coming next. Hold this in the left hand, or if you're right-handed, do it this way. 1 and 2 and 3, and 3 might be enough, but I'll do 4. Cut a nice long tail. Take that tail, wrap all the way around the center. And then tie it off with the other end. Like that. And then I'll apply some hot glue right to the center of this little bow and press it to the top of the beard. Don't put it too high because you don't want to obscure the features. Since I had my iron plugged into my left, my glue gun is way over to my right. And it's out of frame, I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna touch this up right here to make this a little bit more flat, and maybe this piece just a little bit more, just a little bit of finessing. Do you hear the woodpecker? Can you hear that knocking sound? That's a woodpecker outside. All right, now for the hat. I think I'm going to use the same fabric, although that won't be enough. I have a bigger piece, right? Yes. I'll cut this out, and I'll switch my machine to red thread. Here's my hat. I'm going to fold it in half. So the straight edge will be the bottom, and then obviously the curved edge will sew, and this will be the top. So I'm going to fold it in half, pin it, and then stitch up this curved edge with my 3/16 inch seam allowance. It does not have to be perfect. I backstitched at the beginning and the end, and here's a pro tip from Ruby. When you're sewing a shape like this, it's a lot easier to start at the bottom and sew toward the point rather than trying to sew from the point down. So I'll trim off this little tip and turn it to the right side. With the seam open, I'm going to turn up about 1/4 inch. And by hand, I'm going to stitch around, sort of with a gathering stitch, with a running stitch. This is designed to fit the head. Once you take up that little 1/4 inch hem. And there's another reason. I'm always concerned about when I put a hat on and then I do the hanging loop, and the hanging loop, the glue on the hat is the only thing that's holding the whole ornament up. So I'm going to do a gathering stitch and pull it tight around the head and glue it, and glue on some trim to make sure that there's a lot of glue that's holding that hat on the head, so that I can be assured that the hanging loop will be secure and the hat won't just pull right off. All right, so pressing that seam allowance open and tucking under 1/4 inch, I'm going to gather up or running stitch around this edge with a single strand of white quilting thread. And like I say, if I had red quilting thread, I would use it. I'm going to start by anchoring my thread in the back, right where the seam allowances are, with a knot on the inside. And then I'll just work a little running stitch right around the hem, the brim of the hat, with that edge folded in, very close to the fold. And I'll try the hat on, make sure it's going to fit, and I think it is. Good. Yeah, it's perfect. All right, so I will knot off my thread on the inside. It doesn't matter because I'm going to put some trim on, so I could tie it off on the outside as well. Now we'll glue the hat onto the head, starting in the back. I'm going to apply some glue right here in the back. It's only glued in the back right now. Just want to make sure I'm getting it just right with that seam centered. And the seam is about to touch the beard in the back, and then kind of angles up to the forehead. That looks good. Now I'm going to apply the glue from ear across the top of the head to the opposite ear, like that. And then I'm going to work that hat across. I want to be sure the glue is nice and secure. I don't need to pull it all the way down to the features because I still have a piece of trim to add. So I don't have to pull it all the way down. I just want to make sure it's pushed into the glue. Now I'm going to glue this trim on, and ideally I want the edge of the trim to be on the face, on the wood, like this, in the front, and then along the edge of the hat in the back. I'm starting and beginning right here over his left eye, but when I'm looking at it, he's on the right, so on the right side of the face as you're looking at it, and I'll glue that trim around the edge of the hat, starting and beginning over this eye. And the reason why is because I'm going to fold the hat down over that eye. All right. I'm making sure to cover up all those little stitches all the way around and up to here to just barely touch or overlap the first edge. Now I have a little jingle bell to sew on the tip of the hat. I have a red jingle bell. I'm going to sew this little bell on with baker's twine. The only trick with baker's twine is to make sure your needle is big enough and the eye is large enough to accommodate the baker's twine. I think I'll do a bow. All right. And then I'm going to fold this down. I'm going to try not to let the seam show in the front. The seam is in the back. And I'm going to fold this down over the front like this so that the overlapping of the trim is concealed. So I'll put some glue right there on the trim, and then press the hat into the trim, into the glue, I mean. I'm going to tie the streamers into little overhand knots. I'll use the baker's twine for my hanging loop. That looks good. Cute. All right, I promised that I would describe the patterns for you. We'll start with the body. I don't have this on graph paper like I usually do, but I have something else that might work. Is that in the center? Okay. So at the widest point, it's 3 1/4. And the height is 5. So that's easy. 3 1/4 by 5. At the top, 1 1/2. So did I say 3 1/4? 3 1/4 by 5. I would have a rectangle 3 1/4 by 5. Then I would go over 3/4 of an inch and cut to round it off. The hat pattern I just made, so I still have even the pencil lines. I just measured around the circumference of the head, and I determined that I would like my pattern to be 3 1/2 across at the bottom. And remember, I'm going to turn up 1/4 of an inch, so it's actually going to be a little bit less than that when it's completed. And it is 3 1/4 tall. I think I wanted it 3, and then I added 1/4 of an inch for seam allowance. And it could be taller. It could be pointier. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.